Great to have you with us today. Your commander of common sense at your service. A lot of gibberish, a lot of nonsense out there. Let's get right to the truth. Joining us now, Dr. Ben Carson. He is the Secretary of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's right. Jack Kemp used to be that, way back in the George H. Bush days. So it's got a long legacy. And Dr. Carson has got a few major changes coming up. Last January, HUD suspended the obligation of local governments to file plans under a certain regulation. In May, withdrew a computer assessment tool required to be used by local governments in preparing those plans. And now the good doctor, the Secretary of HUD, and the Trump administration wants to shift the way it enforces an aspect of fair housing around the U.S., pivoting from efforts to integrate lower-income housing into wealthier neighborhoods in favor of promoting more housing development overall, making more housing available for those in need. And joining us now to sort that out, the Secretary of HUD, Dr. Ben Carson. Mr. Secretary, great to have you back, sir.
Great to be with you again. Thanks.
Okay, this is kind of an exciting time. This is a pretty bold move that, is going to get pushed off the radar screen because everybody wants to talk about Omarosa or Russian collusion or things of that nature that don't matter. But I want you to outline this because basically it seems to me like your objective here is to increase available opportunity for people. Sir, how does this work?
Well, right now we're only able to help about 1 out of every 4 families in need of affordable housing. And the affordable housing situation is actually a crisis. And the previous administration, through their interpretation of the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing portion of the Fair Housing Act, encompassed a lot of very complex regulations and tools that really made it very difficult to create affordable housing. So, in fact, in medicine we learn to first do no harm, but, when the government comes up with things that actually keep you from accomplishing the goal, it needs to be looked at again. I don't think it was done in a malicious way, but people simply were not paying attention. They were more concerned about the rules than they were about the goals. And we've changed that around. And we're really looking to be able to get people out of poverty and to use housing as a mechanism for doing that. So what we're thinking about is, instead of this complex tool that has a big screen with each demographic being represented by a different color and saying, if we can move some of these pink to this green area, we'll be okay. It's not working. So what we would prefer to do is use the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Act to remove some of the multitudinous barriers that prevent the development of multifamily housing. And you must recognize that when we do that now, it's done very differently than the way it was done in the past. In the past, the government came in with a big bucket of money, created this multifamily dwelling, and then rolled off in the sunset while it immediately started to deteriorate. And that's what people think of now when they think of public housing and multifamily housing. It's not done that way anymore. Now we do public-private partnerships and cooperative things that give some interest of the local community to the maintenance of these places. And we build holistic communities, and we try to make sure that there's food and there's transportation and that there's educational advancement, all these kinds of things, because those are the things that actually develop people. We don't want to continue a culture where we put people in subsidized housing, not for a few years, but for generations, and, create dependency. When we have people who have enormous gifts and talents, we need to develop those for the prosperity of our country.
So, Mr. Secretary, I want you to get back to what you say, 1 out of every 4 people who are in need of affordable housing are able to obtain it. when you say 1 out of every 4, is that 1 out of every 4 who would qualify and are attempting to obtain it, and only 25% is available?
Yes, we simply don't have it available. You know, you look at some of the high-cost areas like Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. 70% of the land is zoned for single-family housing with a certain amount of acreage. And then you throw on top of that all the different regulations. It's almost impossible to build affordable housing in a situation like that. That's why you have so many homeless people there. So, you know, we need to be looking at those kinds of things and saying, what can we do to alleviate some of those restrictions? Now, a lot of those zoning restrictions, again, are based on archaic models, things that we don't do anymore. So, you know, we're not interested in creating, horrible ghettos where there's a lot of violence and lack of opportunity. That's not what we're up to anymore.
So when you say you want to shift the focus from the Obama administration, Mr. Secretary had a computer model, basically, and it wanted to develop affordable housing in wealthy communities. And basically, if I'm understanding what your policy is here, what you're saying is the objective is to get additional housing units affordable, but in areas that have transportation, have a good schooling system, so that people can get in there, develop themselves, and then get out, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the objective.
And if people, want to be in another area, we do have housing choice vouchers that allow people to move to other areas. What we're doing right now is working on making them more palatable so that they don't come with so many regulations that a landlord would say, I don't want to take that person. That's the way you deal with that. You don't create this big bureaucracy in order to do that. And the current system as it exists right now, if you have a multifamily dwelling that is predominated by a certain racial group, they actually discourage you from investing into that economically neglected area. That's exactly the wrong thing to be doing if we want to create more affordable housing.
So what are the types of incentives? I mean, what would you do in order to get various cities to change their zoning policies in order to accommodate your vision?
Well, we would simply make it clear to them what the impediments are to building affordable houses, and that if they can address those impediments, they are going to be much higher on the list of people who receive funding.
And so is this a legislative effort, an effort by fiat? Like, how do you go about actually implementing what your vision is, sir?
We have to redo the rule. And what we're doing right now is collecting from across the country public comments on what the affordable housing initiative should be. So when we talk about affirmatively furthering fair housing, we want to hear from the actual people who are affected by these policies, not by a bunch of bureaucrats sitting around with ideologies that don't necessarily impact people's lives the right way.
So, Mr. Secretary, you want comment from people that would actually be qualifying for your new idea for increased affordable housing, not just ideological dogma, but people that are not in housing now that want to get there. You want them to weigh in.
Exactly. And we've already heard from a lot of the people who administer the programs, and they're not particularly happy with the system as it exists now because it's way too complex and requires a lot of man hours, a lot of money, and doesn't get things accomplished.
Mr. Secretary, the 75% of people that would be requiring affordable public housing that can't get into one now, because you said only 1 out of 4 actually are able to take advantage of it. Do you have a goal in mind? Do you want to cut that to 50%? Is there an empirical objective that you have in mind, sir?
Yeah, the objective is to utilize things like the Envision Centers, which will be available to people. They will be located near public housing or near subsidized housing complexes, but they're available for people who are on the waiting list and for people in the neighborhood in general. And we're able to take the federal programs from 22 different agencies, as well as state and local agencies, nonprofits, the private sector, faith-based community, those wraparound services that actually allow people to move toward educational advancement, economic empowerment, health and wellness, character and leadership, all of those things, making them available to people. So they may actually be able to skip the whole subsidized housing thing and go straight to self-sufficiency.
Well, that would be the goal, no question. We've only got a couple more minutes. We're with Dr. Ben Carson. He is the U.S. Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Doctor, let me ask you this. I interviewed you a couple times during your campaign for president, and now you're serving in President Trump's cabinet as a U.S. Secretary. You've been there for about 18 months now. What is the biggest surprise you've had? Because, you always have a vision of, or you think what it's going to be like going in, serving in the cabinet, taking over a major bureaucracy like HUD. What was the biggest shocker since you've been there?
Well, probably the biggest shocker is that a lot of people who've been here for 10, 20, 30, 40 years were quickly able to understand the vision and understand that our goal is not to concentrate on programs, but to concentrate on people. Mm-hmm. And success is not how many people we get into a program, but how many people we get out of it. And, that's not really a partisan issue. Mm-hmm. That's an American issue. Mm-hmm. And, I was somewhat surprised at how quickly people came to accept that. And the other thing that surprised me is how incredibly dishonest a lot of the media is. They tell parts of stories, they present them in ways that completely give people the wrong impressions, and they do it on purpose. And I knew it was bad, but it's serious.
Why would they do that at HUD when what you're attempting to do is to increase the housing availability for people in need? Why would they twist anything? Why wouldn't they be applauding your efforts?
There's a poverty industry that exists in this country, and they actually benefit from keeping people in a dependent situation. And, I think we just have to continue to do what's right. The proof will be in the pudding as people begin to emerge from poverty, as they begin to benefit from the things that are there. It actually benefits us as a society because those individuals that we no longer have to support, and number two, they become tax-paying, productive members of society who may discover a new energy source.
So just a final question, sir. It sounds like you've been able to galvanize your federal employee staff at HUD into really believing and buying into what your vision is, even though, as you said, many of them have been there for a long time and they've gone through various secretaries and various different policies. How have you done that? Through one-on-one meetings, through small group speeches? What have you done?
And including people, asking for their opinions. We do things differently. For instance, you might have heard that we were trying to change our mission statement. And,
yes.
We do that in a way that we include everybody's opinion. The media got it wrong when they said that, we didn't want to include certain things. That's just the beginning of the process. We're going through and getting everybody's opinion in the entire organization. And, when you include people and it's important to you what they know, it makes a difference.
All right, it's going to be the final word. I really applaud your efforts, Mr. Secretary. This is very exciting. And just the opportunity for more people to take advantage of the housing aspects of the housing. And I tell you what, the example you made in Los Angeles, I think everybody should really digest this, because there's many days, Doctor, where we get on the air and we say, tonight, 25,000 people in Los Angeles, U.S. citizens, were sleeping under bridges, in drain pipes, in the woods. I mean, we have an epidemic in LA. 25,000 people don't have homes. And as you said, you can't even get the regulations there are such that you can't even provide them with the opportunity to get housing. I mean, that to me is a real crisis that hopefully you're going to be able to straighten out.
It is, and a lot of people simply are unaware of it. And as we make them more aware of it and incentivize people to fix that problem, I think we can make progress.
All right. We thank you for your time, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for being with us, sir, so much.
Thank you.